Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Monday, April 28th, day 570 of the war. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with our military reporter, Emanuel Fabian, and culture editor and my partner in crime at the daily briefing, Jessica Steinberg. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Jessica.
So last week when we spoke with Manny, he was about to enter the Gaza Strip into the Morag Corridor. We'll find out what he saw during that trip and also his comparisons to previous visits into the Gaza Strip. We'll learn more about the recent deaths of 3 servicemen in the Gaza Strip and what's happening in terms of the fighting on the ground there right now. We'll also hear about a strike, an airstrike into Lebanon yesterday in the Beirut suburbs. Jessica is here and she will describe to us what she saw during the March of the Living in Poland, which she witnessed on the ground last week. And also last night, she was at a magnificently huge protest for the Beautiful Six in Jerusalem. We'll hear more. All of this and much more when we're back.
A child,
a soldier,
a farmer,
a grandparent.
In our Those We Have Lost project, the Times of Israel tells the stories of individuals slain in Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th, 2023. With 1,100 individual entries covering almost every single person killed by Hamas, our Those We Have Lost project paints a picture of each of their lives and the ongoing ripple effects of their deaths. The Those We Have Lost project works to ensure that despite the massive scale of the loss, no one is forgotten.
a teacher,
a musician,
a tourist,
a peacenik,
a farmer,
a grandparent.
a soldier.
Visit the project's homepage on the Times of Israel.
Together.
We keep their memories alive. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, and let's start with our military reporter, Emanuel Fabian. So, Manny, when we spoke last week, you were about to enter the Morag Corridor, and you've been to Gaza numerous times. So, first of all, I would just like to hear, has anything changed in terms of what you're seeing on the ground?
We're seeing the army establish this new corridor. It's actually been carried out much, I would say, faster than the previous corridors that were established. So the Neta corridor took the IDF months to sort of build up and expand and put down this road. But what we're seeing in Rafah is the army's advancing into areas where Hamas is still believed to be. And at the same time, they're building this corridor. They're not waiting to do the second thing. So we're seeing already more than half of this corridor, this road in the corridor has already been built. So this allows troops to reach these areas much more easily with regular vehicles. You don't need to go in with a tank or with a armored personnel carrier. It's a relatively safe area. The army's cleared quite a large buffer zone surrounding this road, which splits between Rafah and Khan Yunis. And in general, the operations in Gaza right now are, I would say, not as intensive as we may have seen in the beginning of the war. Because the whole goal of this operation right now is to pressure Hamas back into a hostage deal, and going all out, which is something that the army is preparing for, is on hold right now until Israel sees that Hamas is either going towards a deal or not going. So it is different right now. So there's less intensive fighting, but there is in some areas. So, for example, in Rafah, there's the neighborhood of Shabura and the Tel Sultan area. The army is operating relatively, intensely in those areas because there are believed to be several dozen Hamas operatives still in those areas. So they've been essentially trapped in those areas because the army's essentially surrounded them from all directions now. So in those areas, there is more intense fighting. And of course, in northern Gaza, as we saw over the weekend, there has been several deadly incidents of fire there.
Right. And over the weekend, as you said, starting on Thursday, we've seen the deaths of 3 servicemen. I keep saying servicemen because not all of them were part of the IDF. And they are Master Sergeant Asaf Cafri, Captain Ido Voloch, and Sergeant Neta Yitzhak Kahane. And he was part of the Border Police's Yamas covert unit. As I understand it, Voloch and Kahane were killed together in one incident. Is that correct, Manny?
It's within the same area, but over about 2 hours of a very long incident, which included several exchanges of fire.
Okay, so let's hear what you can tell us about this incident. As I said, Kahana was part of Yamas, so I'm not sure what is actually open for description at this point. What are you allowed to say?
Right, so the Yamas unit was operating alongside the Jerusalem Brigade. It's a reserve infantry brigade. They were operating in Shtijah, Gaza City neighborhood, one of the eastern neighborhoods, so close to the Israeli border. The army's been operating there to expand Israel's buffer zone along the Gaza border, clear the area of Hamas infrastructure. It's a relatively dangerous neighborhood. There's been, even previously during the war and in previous decades, there's been quite intense fighting in Shtijah. So during these operations, the Yamas unit and the Jerusalem Brigade, they left behind an ambush in a building and waited there for Hamas members to show up. When they did show up, it was on Friday afternoon. The troops exchanged fire with these Hamas operatives. And during that exchange of fire, Sergeant Neta was killed. Then rescue forces were then dispatched to try and reach these troops because another Yamas officer was also wounded in this exchange of fire. And during these attempts to rescue, the troops came under heavy fire. So a Humvee that tried to reach the area was hit by an RPG and a soldier was wounded. An hour later, there were at least 5 RPGs fired at Israeli tanks in the area, one of which killed Voloch and lightly wounded another soldier. And then an hour after that, 2 reservists from the Jerusalem Brigade were also moderately wounded by RPG fire, all in the same area. So really just quite an intense 2 hours or plus of fighting, which began with this whole ambush attempt.
And the previous day, when Asaf Cafri was killed on Thursday, reports indicate that his father and grandmother were taking part of the March of the Living. His grandmother is a Holocaust survivor. Manny, what can you tell us about the incident which killed Asaf Cafri?
So Cafri was a tank driver in the 14th Armored Brigade. It's another reserve brigade. And this was in Bet Hanun, so very close again to the Israeli border, part of this expanding buffer zone. He was in he was next to one of the IDF posts there, and from what we understand from the army's investigation and also from Hamas footage that the terror group has published, he was outside of his tank. He wasn't driving the tank during the attack, and he was hit by sniper fire in the area. And then following the sniper fire, Hamas also launched RPGs and light arms at the troops in the area. So the sniper fire killed Cafri, but it also seriously wounded another 2 soldiers, and another soldier was also moderately wounded in this incident. And the cell behind the attack apparently managed to also flee.
What we're hearing from Defense Minister Israel Katz is that the fighting will become more intensive, that the fighting will have a price on Israel. We're seeing that already, obviously. You mentioned earlier that this is part of the strategy to pressure Hamas into coming to the table with a better offer. We're not really seeing that as yet, as far as I can see. And so do you feel like there's some kind of timeline on this tactic, Manny?
I think there is a timeline, but I don't think we know what the timeline is. I think that's a bit of a problem. The army has said, both the army and the defense minister have said that they're preparing for this eventual, I would say, large-scale offensive in Gaza, where the army needs to call up masses of reservists and try to defeat Hamas on the field. Of course, such an operation risks the lives of the remaining living hostages in Gaza, without a doubt, and the army is well aware of this. So that's why they're not giving a timeline. Also, because if they were to give a time, it would help Hamas, of course, as well. But I do think that we're getting close to something like that, where Israel has to go all in to try and defeat Hamas on the field, while risking the hostages. I think we're getting close to that, but I don't know if it's days, weeks, or months before a decision is actually made, and it's not up to the IDF. I've asked them, and they said it's not up to them. It's up to the political level, the prime minister, the defense minister. They will decide whenever the time they think is right to carry that out.
Okay, let's turn to Lebanon. And yesterday, for only the third time since the ceasefire was reached in November, the Air Force bombed near Beirut, essentially a suburb of Beirut. So, Manny, what was the goal of this current strike?
So the IDF has said that Hezbollah was storing precision missiles in this warehouse in Beirut's southern suburbs. It's a Hezbollah stronghold known as Dahia. Before carrying out the strike, the army issued an evacuation warning, telling civilians to evacuate 300 meters or so from the area. And Israel said that this facility where Hezbollah was storing precision missiles posed a threat to Israel, and therefore is a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. The ceasefire agreement says that no armed groups can be in South Lebanon, but there's this sort of side letter between Israel and the US, which says that Israel can act against any immediate and significant threat, and therefore that's why Israel is able to carry out strikes in Beirut or anywhere north of the Litani River if Israel sees something that it believes is to be a threat to the country.
This obviously is not the first option. As I said, this is only the third time that the Air Force has struck next to Beirut since the ceasefire. And very quickly, there were condemnations from Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. And obviously, that is a factor when the IDF is preparing for such a maneuver for bombing next to Beirut. So I just wonder, you say a factory that had precision missiles. What kind of scope are we talking about? Something that is just so huge that would change the course of this ceasefire? Or do you know anything more than just a factory or a warehouse?
I don't know. That's all we're hearing from Israeli officials, at least, that it was being used to store these missiles, and that is a violation. I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like if this site had existed already previously, then Israel would have already bombed it a long time ago. I think, we're already months into the ceasefire. I think it's safe to assume that these missiles were moved here at some point recently. And that's why Israel went to go bomb it, because otherwise we would have seen this being bombed a while ago during the fighting, or maybe in the beginning of the ceasefire. It could be that Israel already warned the mechanism, the US-led mechanism, about this site, and Lebanese officials didn't go and deal with it, and that's why Israel struck. We don't have that information, but it does seem to me that Israel thought that this site is a threat to Israel, and it wasn't being dealt with, and therefore it had to act against it.
All right, Manny, thank you so much for all of your updates. You and I will speak again on Wednesday for Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Remembrance Day for fallen soldiers and victims of terror. So I bid you adieu and shalom right now, and we'll go to a short break.
Thank you.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our culture editor, Jessica Steinberg, who since October 7th has also picked up another beat, the beat of hostages and the hostage families. And so last week, Jessica went on the March of the Living, where some 12,000 people attended and marched Holocaust survivors alongside October 7th survivors. It's just chilling. I have goosebumps right now just thinking about this image of the two forms of survivors standing side by side, hugging each other, marching together with the Israeli flag, which is honestly the most beautiful flag in the whole world. So, Jessica, tell me a little bit about your impressions of being on this very special March of the Living.
So it was unusual, I think, even for March of the Living, for covering this event. It's the 80th year since the liberation of the concentration camps. That was what this March of the Living was about. There were about 80 Holocaust survivors on hand, most of them in their 80s and 90s, of course. The 80-year-olds were babies, literally some of them born a few days into the war, with stories about some of them never meeting their parents because they were separated. And then there was this delegation. There was this October 7th delegation, which included released hostages, hostage family members, and bereaved families. And most of them are very familiar to all of the Israeli press corps who was there, meaning the Hebrew-speaking press, the English language press. And I would say that the Israeli press was very focused on seeing what this experience was like for the hostage families. And they really traveled in a pack, I would say. I'm talking about Eli Sharabi and his brother Sharon, or Shelley Shem Tov, whose son Omer was released in February. The father of Omer Wenkert, a hostage who was released, and Omer's grandmother, who was a Holocaust survivor herself. Bar Cooperstein is a hostage at this moment, and his grandparents were there, and his grandfather is a survivor himself. I don't know if any of them were actually survivors from Auschwitz. I actually don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure. But the fact is, here they were in one of these death camps, talking about their own Holocaust experiences, meeting other survivors, hugging, usually immediate hugs, immediate moments of connection. And yet, many of the hostage families who I spoke to would say to me, it gives them a lot of strength to be there. It gave them a sense of perspective, but their experiences on October 7th and over the last year and a half were not a Holocaust. They were a disaster of tremendous proportions, but not the same kind. And that's what I kept on hearing.
As we said, not only the hostages, the released hostages and the families of those who are currently hostages or released were there, also some of the survivors of the October 7th disaster, the massacre, also took part in this march with the Holocaust survivors by their side. And there are some really moving moments that stood out to me as a bystander looking on from here. And part of that is, of course, dealing with music. I am a former musician myself, and so anytime there's music involved, I am incredibly emotionally involved as well. And we have, of course, Agam Berger, who is one of the surveillance officers who was released, and she played her violin. And also an October 7th survivor, Daniel Weiss, I believe is his last name.
Right.
Yes, who was singing in many different situations. Tell us more about how these people got together and expressed their pain, anguish, and hope.
Yeah. So Agam Berger, who is, as you said, a violinist and has been rehearsing on a Holocaust-era violin that is about 150 years old. Daniel Weiss is a budding musician, guitarist, singer. He's from Kibbutz Be'eri. His father was killed as part of the reconnaissance unit at the kibbutz. His mother was taken hostage and killed in captivity. And they have been rehearsing for several weeks together, kind of a for lack of a better term at this moment, a mashup of the Schindler's List tune and of a very familiar Hebrew tune, Esa Einai, I will lift my eyes to the skies, to the heavens. And they were meant to perform it at the ceremony at the end of the march on Thursday, which they did. The ceremony, unfortunately, was rained out. It was a tremendous torrential downpour, the likes of which organizers say they haven't seen for many years. You had survivors standing in the pouring rain, thousands of people standing in the rain, and the organizers about 5 or 10 minutes in said, we're going to cut this short. Agam and Daniel did perform together, as did the IDF cantor Shai Abramson performed a Yiddish song with one of the survivors. But in a sense, because of the disappointment over the ceremony and how it had to be cut short, I keep on thinking about a moment a day earlier. Everyone tours Auschwitz on Wednesday, which is the day before the march, and including the hostage family members and the released hostages and the survivors and the press and everyone else, all the marchers, everyone is there milling around Auschwitz. And there was a moment where the hostage family contingent came under the iconic gate of Auschwitz. They were standing there. Daniel Weiss is a kibbutznik. He is often barefoot, and he was in Auschwitz as well. And they're all holding Israeli flags. And Daniel Weiss just started singing. He started singing part of the song that he sang the next day in the ceremony, Shomer Yisrael, Protector of Israel, Hatikva, the national anthem. And that was a moment where everyone just stopped. Everyone who was milling around stood still. There was complete silence in that moment, just listening to them. Agam wasn't playing her violin, but she was there. And everyone who knew the words sang at that moment. And it was in a sense, probably a moment of hope, of seeing these people together and singing and raising their voices in a sense. And it was a beautiful day in Auschwitz. What can I tell you? Blue skies and green grass and lilac trees, which doesn't feel right, but that's what it looks like.
That is, of course, part of the dissonance anytime you visit any of these death camps, that it is in countryside. It's a beautiful countryside, and it's a beautiful land. Let's turn back to our beautiful land and the beautiful 6 protest that you attended last night in Jerusalem's Kikar Safra, the municipality square. And as I understand it, some 6,000 people of all walks came out to sing and to just be together. Tell us what you saw there.
Right. So it was very much not a protest. That's what they kept on saying, that it was non-political. It was organized by the families of the 6 that were killed at the end of August deep in a Gaza tunnel. The 6 were Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, Carmel Gat, Almog Sarusi, Eden Yerushalmi, Alex Lubanov, and Ori Danino, who were 6 people from all different walks of life. A kibbutznik from a very religious family, from an Anglo family in Jerusalem, Israelis from a family in Ra'anana. And the families organized this together, hosted by the municipality, by City Hall. And the idea was about unity. I think that's what they discuss a lot together amongst themselves, because they are very much in touch with one another. Maybe not all to the same level, but I know, for instance, the Daninos and the Goldberg-Polins are in steady contact all the time, as well as with the family of Carmel Gat. And they also brought another family, the family of Ram Braslavsky. He is a current hostage. He is a Jerusalemite. And one of the things that John and Rachel spoke about in a real ad that they put together before the event was that everyone should come, and including if you're a fan of a different soccer team. If you're a fan of Beitar, which is considered a more right-wing soccer team, of course not everyone is, or Hapoel, which is considered the more left-wing. The idea was, and there were flags being waved of those 2 soccer teams, for instance, at this huge rally, which, by the way, a few people have said to me this morning it was more than 6,000. I don't know. It's very hard to count these things, but it was certainly the largest ever gathering in Kikar Safra, and that's what Mayor Moshe Leon said at some point. So the idea was to bring some unity to what we are seeing as a fractured society in Israel these days. That it's not about whether we should fight in Gaza or not, or whether you should bring the hostages home or not, although that was a steady call throughout the evening, bring the hostages home, including the mayor said that in his speech. But the idea was to join together that our nation has gone through a tremendous series of blows and that we are not where we should be, and that these families who represent such different sectors of society, they represent what should be happening in Israel. And in fact, Elchanan Danino, the Haredi rabbi father of Ori Danino, who was killed, he said, everyone here should go back to their hometowns, to their mayors, and ask to have a same kind of rally in their city, in their town, to bring song and prayer and to find some sense of unity right now. That was the message, loud and clear.
And I think that's a message we can all get behind. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves and video edited by Thomas Gersh. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.